All right, so in the world of AI, there's this massive duel brewing over one big question. How do we get these large language models to understand our private data? In one corner, you've got the reigning champ, Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. And in the other corner, the powerful new challenger, long context. So let's break down this fight.
Okay, so first things first, we gotta understand a fundamental truth about LLMs. They know a ton about our world, right? But it's all up to a certain cutoff date. They're basically frozen in time. They have absolutely no idea what happened 5 minutes ago. And even more importantly, they know nothing, zero, about your world. You know, your company's internal wiki, your private code base, all that stuff. So the big question, the one we're all trying to answer, is how do we teach them about our world? How do we get the right data in front of them at the exact right time?
Yeah, this whole thing has a name. It's the context injection problem. We've got to find a way to feed the model our private data so it can actually give us useful, relevant answers. I mean, without that, the LLM is just a super knowledgeable stranger, right? It doesn't know you.
And to solve this, two really different philosophies have popped up. On one side, you have RAG. Think of this as the sophisticated multi-step engineering approach. And on the other side, you've got long context, which is honestly a much more direct, almost brute force method.
Okay, so to really get what this duel is all about, we need to break down how each of these contenders actually works. Let's start with the established champion in the ring, RAG. That's Retrieval Augmented Generation.
So, RAG is a pretty involved process. Here's how it goes. First, you take your documents and you have to chunk them up into smaller pieces. Then, you create these things called embeddings for those chunks, basically turning them into numbers, and you store all that in a special vector database. So then, when a user asks a question, the system zips over to that database, retrieves what it thinks are the most relevant chunks, and only injects those little pieces into the LLM's prompt. It's a lot of steps. Now let's look at the other corner. The long context approach is, well, it's kind of shockingly simple. You just skip all that other stuff. You skip the database, you skip the chunking, you skip the embeddings. You literally just take all your documents and stuff them straight into the prompt along with your question. You just let the model itself do all the heavy lifting. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't we just do this all along? Well, for a long time, this brute force method just wasn't possible. Early LLMs had these tiny context windows. We're talking maybe 4,000 tokens. But today's models have absolutely massive context windows. We're talking over 1 million tokens. And that changes everything. Just to give you a sense of scale here, 1 million tokens is about 700,000 words. Get this, you could fit the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy into the prompt, and you'd still have room for The Hobbit. It is just an enormous amount of information you can work with now. So this massive jump in capacity forces us to ask a really critical question. If we can just, copy-paste everything directly into the prompt, is the entire RAG system, with all its vector databases and embedding models, is it all just becoming an unnecessary, complicated mess? And this brings us to round one of our duel. The case for long context. There's a really powerful argument for just stuffing everything into that giant context window, and it really boils down to one word: simplicity. Let's look at 3 key reasons why this is so appealing. First off, you get to completely collapse your infrastructure. Look, a production-ready RAG system is heavy. You need to figure out chunking strategies, you need embedding models, a vector database, re-rankers, and you have to keep all of it in sync. It's just so many moving parts. Long context, on the other hand, offers what some people are calling the no-stack stack. The whole architecture just simplifies down to get the data and send it to the model. That's it. All right, the second big argument is that long context lets you avoid what's being called the retrieval lottery. See, the thing about RAG is it introduces this one critical point of failure, the retrieval step itself. You're basically relying on a fancy search to find the right information, and sometimes it just doesn't. And this can lead to something really bad called silent failure. This is when the answer you're looking for totally exists in your documents, but the RAG system just fails to retrieve the right chunk. So the LLM never even sees it. With long context, there is no retrieval step to fail. The model gets to see everything, and that risk is just gone. And reason number 3 for long context is what you might call the whole book problem. RAG is fundamentally designed to find what's already there, a specific little piece of text that matches your query. But what if the answer isn't in one snippet? What if it's in the gaps between the snippets? Okay, imagine this.
You want to know which features from a product requirements doc were left out of the final release notes. RAG is great at finding chunks about the requirements, and it's great at finding chunks about the release, but it really struggles to see the empty space between them. To spot what's missing, the model needs the full picture. It needs to see both documents in their entirety. And that is exactly what long context gives it. So right now, it's probably sounding like a total knockout for long context, right? It's simpler, it's more reliable, it can reason better, but not so fast. RAG is still very much in this fight, and there are some really compelling reasons why it's not going anywhere just yet.
The first reason is all about cost, or what you could call the rereading tax. Think about it. With long context, if you have a 500-page manual, the model has to process that entire manual every single time you ask a question. That gets expensive fast. Now, RAG also has to process that manual, but it only pays that high price once during the initial setup. After that, your queries are way, way cheaper. Second, there's the needle in the haystack problem. Research is showing that just because a piece of data is in the context window, that doesn't guarantee the model will use it effectively. In fact, as the context gets bigger and bigger, the model's attention can get diluted. It starts to struggle to find that one specific fact, the needle, buried in this giant haystack of text. And this is where RAG really shines. It acts as this incredibly powerful filter. By retrieving only the most relevant chunks, it does all the hard work up front. Basically, RAG removes the haystack and presents the model with just a handful of needles, forcing it to focus on the signal, not all the noise. And the third reason, and this is maybe the most important one, is just the sheer scale of data. A million token context window sounds absolutely huge, and it is, but in the context of enterprise data, we're talking terabytes, even petabytes. A million tokens is just a tiny, tiny drop in the bucket. It's not even close. So, where does that leave us? We've got two super powerful contenders, and each one has some clear strengths and some clear weaknesses. The reality is, there's no single winner here. The right choice depends completely on the specific problem you're trying to solve. And that brings us to the final verdict. It's pretty straightforward, actually. If your problem involves a specific, contained dataset where you need to reason across the whole thing, like say analyzing a single legal contract or summarizing one book, long context is absolutely the way to go. It simplifies your stack and it improves the reasoning. But if you are trying to navigate the practically infinite sea of an enterprise knowledge base, RAG, with its smart retrieval layer, is still the only viable approach. So after weighing all the evidence, which approach makes more sense for the kinds of problems you're thinking about? Are you on Team Long Context because you love that simplicity? Or are you on Team RAG for its sheer scalability? Or maybe you see a future where we're using a little bit of both.